So, you think you know the devil. Think again? What if I told you that his most famous name, Lucifer, is nothing more than a translation blunder involving the planet Venus? That his signature look with the horns and hooves was shamelessly ripped off from a Greek rapist-god who carved flutes from the dismembered bodies of his victims? And that his original job in the Bible wasn't God's enemy, but his official, goddamn prosecutor. You're about to learn the truth. They've hidden from you for centuries a truth that will shatter everything you thought you knew about evil. The devil's name is the result of one colossal screw-up. Intrigued? Good, because we're about to dive headfirst into the murky, stinking sludge that spawned our entire concept of evil. Brace yourselves. They sure as hell don't teach this in Sunday school. Let's start with the big one, the most grandiose name of all. Lucifer has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Menacing, powerful, instantly conjures up images of horns, hooves, and a soul-selling contract signed in blood. Now, buckle up, because that whole image is built on a monumental, an absolutely epic screw-up. A mistake that has cost humanity centuries of fear, ready for the first gut punch. The word Lucifer is, get this, the goddamn ancient Roman name for the planet Venus. Yeah, that Venus. The one you see in the sky just before dawn. The morning star, and in Latin, that's Lucifer, literally from lux and fair. The light bringer, just a bright dot in the pre-dawn sky. Beautiful, yes. Demonic, not a chance. So how the hell did a planet become history's greatest villain? This is where it gets good. Crack open your Bible to the book of Isaiah. In it, there's a famous verse. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. Sounds like a fallen angel, right? Except the entire passage isn't about angels or demons. It was a diss track. You get it? A poetic rap battle aimed at a very arrogant, pompous king of Babylon who thought he was equal to the gods. The prophet was just mocking him. Hey, you bright shining star boy, thought you'd shine forever. Well, tough shit. Look at you eating dirt now. It was a metaphor, a taunt, the humiliation of a wannabe dictator. And everything would have been fine if not for one very diligent guy in the 4th century AD who decided to translate the Bible into Latin, St. Jerome. Picture his cell, candles, parchment, the stench of unwashed bodies, and old ink. A titanic task translating the holy texts for all of future Europe. He gets to that verse in Isaiah. He sees the Hebrew Hel Ben Shahar, shining one, son of the dawn, basically, the morning star. And he goes, so, what do we Romans call the morning star? Oh, right, Lucifer. And he writes the word down, no malice. Just a direct, accurate translation. A small, harmless word. Like a maggot's egg laid in a sacred text. Nobody even noticed, and then things spun out of control. That's when the abscess burst. Centuries later, people read that text, having completely forgotten about some Babylonian king. Context, history, who cares about that? The imagery was just too juicy. Lucifer, fallen from heaven. Bingo, the pieces snapped together. From a translation quirk, from a political satire roasting a Middle Eastern tyrant, the most powerful image of darkness in Western culture was born. The irony is so thick you could choke on it. A name that literally means light bringer became the synonym for absolute darkness. All the pyres, the torture, the witch hunts, the exorcisms, all fueled by fear of a name that was just a planet's nickname in a poetic taunt. So who's the real bringer of darkness here? The ancient show-off king or the people who, for centuries, couldn't be fucking bothered to read the footnotes? But that, my friends, was just the first layer of the lie. It's about to get a whole lot filthier. The devil stole his body from a horny goat god. Ready to go further down the rabbit hole of lies. Last time, we established that the name Lucifer is basically an ancient meme, a roast of some jacked-up king. But if the name is a fake, what about everything else? Close your eyes. No, seriously, close them. Picture the devil. What do you see? Horns, cloven hooves, goat legs, and, of course, that lecherous, filthy stare. Recognize the picture. Good. Now hold on tight. All of it is stolen. Ripped off, to be blunt. They won't tell you this in Sunday school, but our Prince of Darkness had a body donor, and his name was Pan. Yep, that Pan, the Greek god of the forests, shepherds, wild nature, and uncontrollable animal lust. He wasn't evil. He was just primal. You know, the kind of dude with a permanent hard-on who chased after anything that moved. The horns, the hooves, the hairy legs, that was his standard look. All natural, so to speak. But don't let the pastoral image fool you. Behind the god of the wild lurked a true monster, a mythological sexual predator. Picture the horror. You're a forest nymph minding your own business, picking flowers. And then IT stumbles out of the bushes. It's not some guy chasing you, but a half-beast that reeks of sweat, goat fur, and raw, undisguised want. He doesn't try to charm you or recite poetry. He just wants to take you, by force. The most chilling story is that of a nymph named Syrinx. Pan saw her and, naturally, he was instantly inflamed with lust. The girl fled in terror. She tore through the thicket, branches scratching her skin, her lungs burning for air, and behind her, the thud of hooves and heavy, lustful panting. In the final second, as he was about to grab her, she prayed to the gods and was transformed into a patch of reeds by the river. Think Pan was upset. That he felt remorse for destroying her. Not a chance. He was furious that she'd escaped him, that he'd been denied her body. So, what did he do? He chopped down those reeds. He took what was left of her body, cut it into pieces of different lengths, bound them together, and made himself a flute. Just let that nightmare sink in. The famous pan flute, that symbol of pastoral idol, is made from the body of a raped and literally dismembered nymph. Every gentle melody he played was her dying gasp, trapped in the reeds. It was the sound of his triumph over her will. He couldn't have her living, so he would have her dead, forcing her to sing for his pleasure. And it was this very image of a lecherous, cruel, goat-legged monster who turns another's pain into his music that the early Christian church weaponized. They looked at the pagan pantheon and asked, all right, who's the most depraved and disgusting one here? Oh, him, the goat-legged rapist, perfect candidate for the role of cosmic evil. They took the most debauched, most animalistic god from their rival's pantheon and just slapped the devil label on him. It was a genius PR move, destroy the old faith by turning its most vivid and wild god into a boogeyman for children and adults alike. So yeah, the horns and hooves aren't a seal from hell, they're a stolen identity. Another layer of lies smeared on top of the last. We've debunked the name, we've debunked the look. But don't you feel like the puzzle is still missing a piece? If he's not a fallen angel and not some goat god from Greece, then who the hell is he? And what does he actually do? Oh, this is where we get to the most festering sore in this whole story. To his real job, and trust me, it has nothing to do with what you think. His greatest weapon isn't a pitchfork, but something far more shocking. All right, ready? Buckle up, because we're about to dive into filth so deep, you'll be scrubbing for a long, long time. Forget the tridents, the pitchforks, and the flaming swords. That's all child's play, cheap props for a Hollywood blockbuster. The devil's real weapon, his primary tool, which he used for centuries to impale pious souls, was far more shocking, and they definitely won't cover this in history class. His greatest weapon was his cock? That's right, you heard me. It was the enormous, eternally erect phallus of the goat god Pan that became the central feature of the Christian devil's image. You see the twisted genius of it. The church fathers didn't just need to scare people, they needed to provoke disgust, to create an image of absolute, animalistic sign. And what could be more animalistic and primal than uncontrollable, blind lust, the kind that knows no morals, no taboos? A lust that reeks of sweat, damp earth, and something wild that sits deep inside every one of us like a festering splinter. Originally, in the most ancient frescoes, this organ was painted pitch black, like the void itself, like the primordial darkness from which all our filthiest desires crawl. But then, apparently, Hell's PR department decided a rebranding was in order, and it became red. A bright, burning crimson, like the white-hot metal they used to torture sinners, the color of hellfire itself. So that when you looked at it, you felt not just temptation, but the heat of your own future pyre. But wait, here's the cherry on top of this rotten cake. Remember the story of the serpent who tempted Eve in the Garden of Eden? You really think all that drama was about an apple? How charmingly naive! That whole story is one big, throbbing, pulsating metaphor, the tempting serpent slithering into Eden, coiling around the tree of knowledge. That is the phallic symbol. The temptation of Eve wasn't about a chat with a talking lizard. It was about the awakening of that same wild, primal sexuality that the church tried so desperately to burn out of human nature with a red-hot poker. And right about now, you're probably thinking, so they drew a picture. What's the big deal? The big deal, my friends, is that this image became the most powerful weapon of psychological terror in history. A weapon used to brand, humiliate, and send people to the stake. And just how that instrument was turned into a conveyor belt for torture and execution. We'll get to that in the next part. Trust me, it gets even filthier. Christianity declared war. So, my dears, ready to plunge head first into the muck, I promise to tell you how the image of the witch became a conveyor belt of death. Well, you don't build a conveyor belt on empty ground. First, you have to pour the foundation. And the foundation for hundreds of thousands of bonfires across Europe was a single, simple, yet brutally ingenious idea. Christianity declared war, not just any war, but a total war of annihilation. And the main weapon in this war was, as we'd call it today, a total rebranding. Just imagine, you're taking over a market, and your primary goal is to wipe out all the competition. What do? You don't just say your product is better. You launch a campaign claiming the competitor's product is pure poison, that it causes cancer, impotence, and makes your brain turn to mush. That's exactly what happened. The new faith proclaimed that all the old gods, every last one of them, weren't just fairy tales. No, that would be too easy. They were all demons, devils, minions of Satan. Do you see what a power play that is? They don't teach you this in the history books. There, it's all prim and proper, but in reality, it was the dirtiest marketing trick in history. An entire millennial culture, all the beliefs of your ancestors, turned into Satanism with a single stroke of a pen. Let's get into the juicy details. I know you love the gory bits. Take the Greek god Pan, god of the forests, wine, wild nature, fertility, and, let's just say, some very unrestrained sexual appetites. He was the embodiment of animalistic, unbridled passion. So what does the new ideology do with him? It's simple, really. You take his horns, his goat legs, his animal lust, dial up the scary parts a few notches. And voila, you have the spitting image of Satan, a portrait they would then shove in your face on every church fresco. This was no coincidence. It was a targeted PR smear campaign. The god of wild revelry and nature became the symbol of absolute evil. Or take Eos, the goddess of the dawn, the sweet, rosy-fingered goddess, who, by the way, regularly kidnapped handsome mortal men to be her lovers. In the old world, well, she was just an eccentric goddess with her quirks. But in the new world, what does that make her? That's right. A she-devil, a succubus who steals men's souls through their beds, draining them of their life force. Sound familiar? Say hello to the future accusations leveled against witches. And so it went, with every single one of them. Any stream spirit your great-grandmother left milk out for? Any forest protector the hunters left offerings for? Any fertility goddess whose symbols women wore for a safe birth, all of it was now unholy. Evil spirits, demons thirsting for your blood and your soul. Just feel the sheer terror of that for the common person. You and your ancestors had prayed to that oak tree for centuries, and now you're told, no, you are praying to the devil. You and your entire family are damned. Every single one of your old rituals was a step into the fires of hell. This wasn't just a change of religion. It was a complete rewriting of the cultural DNA, where everything you held dear and sacred became filthy, depraved, and modelly dangerous. And so, once the old gods had been turned into demons, the church needed someone who was actually working with them. A human agent on the ground, the perfect scapegoat to pin all this new, manufactured devilry on. And who was it? Of course, it was the people who still remembered the old ways. The healers, the midwives, the herbalists. All the keepers of ancient, pre-Christian knowledge. They created an enemy out of thin air, and in the next part, we'll talk about how they created a detector for this enemy. About how a common birthmark became the devil's mark, and how knowing about medicinal herbs was a one-way ticket to the torture chamber. And that, my friends, is where the real, sticky, bloody horror begins. Until then, the devil wasn't always evil. Well, my beautiful Dark Souls, you came back for more. I promised you the sticky, bloody horror of the torture chambers, and we will get there. Oh yes, we will. But before we hear the crunch of bone and breathe in the stench of scorched flesh, we need to take one step back. Because to understand the true depth of this madness, we have to ask, who was this whole gruesome party for? Who is the big bad, the cosmic boogeyman that had people turned into bloody mincemeat for centuries? Everyone thinks they know the answer. The devil, Satan, Lucifer, the horned dude downstairs, just waiting to roast your ass for all eternity. Well, prepare to have your minds blown. Ready for this? They definitely don't teach you this in Sunday school. In the Old Testament, the original, most ancient part of the Bible, the devil we all know and fear simply isn't there. Nope, nada, doesn't exist. The Satan who occasionally shows up isn't the Lord of Hell or the source of all cosmic evil. It's more of a job title, a function. In Hebrew, ha-Satan means the accuser or the prosecutor. Think of him as a da on God's payroll, whose job is to test the righteousness of mortals, like in the story of Job. He isn't God's enemy. He's his, for Christ's sake, subordinate. So, where the hell did this horned, alpha villain come from? Where did this image of absolute, total, 100% evil crawl out of? Well, my friends, he was stolen. That's right, you heard me. The whole concept of the epic battle between good and evil, light and darkness, pure bliss and utter agony, it was shamelessly ripped off from another, much older religion. Everyone, meet Zoroastrianism, an ancient Persian faith that was wildly popular long before Christianity became mainstream. And their setup was simple and clean, like a Hollywood blockbuster. You've got your supreme good guy God, Ahura Mazda, creator of all that is good. And you've got his eternal adversary, the evil spirit Angra Mainyu, the source of lies, destruction, disease, death, and every other piece of shit you can imagine. Two titans, to polar opposites. An eternal war, the end, simple and brilliant. And this idea so simple, so easy to grasp, so convenient, first leaked into Judaism during the Babylonian exile, and then became the very bedrock of Christianity. Why bother with complicated theological hang-ups when you can just grab a pre-made template? There's our God, and there's THEI, our God. There's good, and there's absolute evil that must be hated and destroyed. A genius marketing move, wasn't it? Do you see how twisted this is? They didn't just invent an enemy. They imported one wholesale, like a cheap Chinese knockoff. They took a Persian spirit of destruction, slapped some horns on him, gave him a pitchfork, called him Satan, and said, "There he is, the cause of all your suffering, fear him." And hunt down his servants, and that gave them free rein. It was a carte blanche for any and all kinds of madness. Because now any dissent isn't just a mistake. It's the whisper of Angra Mainyu disguised as Satan. Any old woman gathering roots in the woods isn't just a village healer, she's his bride. And suddenly you start smelling sulfur in every house where people are reading the wrong books or asking too many questions. They created the perfect enemy for themselves, convenient, easy to understand, absolute, and now it's time to see how they fought him. And this, my friends, is where we finally descend into the cellars, down to where it smells of piss, fear, and burnt flesh. Down to where theory meets reality. Don't touch that dial. This is going to be painful. There it is, the truth they've been hiding from you. Our greatest fear is a Frankenstein's monster stitched together from translation blunders, stolen myths, and an ancient Persian action flick. If you get a kick out of watching us rip the lid off of respectable history, don't be stingy. Smash that subscribe button and slam that like so I know you want more of this. And in the comments, I want your theories. What other historical or mythological figure do you think is just a hyped-up fake whose real story has been buried? Dig deeper,